I love making D&D NPCs, and this time I sort of invented a very cruel disease to go along with it. Hey, I'm Gemma, a professional artist. A couple years ago, I was introduced to D&D. I fell in a deep obsession over it. I live and breathe for these math rocks now. So I've decided to devote a bunch of my time to reading these gibberish instructions on how to make monsters and NPC stat blocks so you don't have to. Let's create Mushroom Madness. When starting characters, I like to use dice to randomize my characters, eliminating my own bias and preference from the builds and characters. First we'll roll for race, as it doesn't really matter too much to any story elements. Elf. Elf is kinda basic. We might not even know that they're elf, depending on if their hair covers their ears. A lot of D&D characters are made with very practical outfits, but I find that a bit boring and actually unrealistic. People should have personality and style, just like in our modern world. Again, not to let my own personal bias influence my character, I like to roll my math rocks for our style. Lolita. That's a very iconic style type. Easily recognizable and already fits wonderfully into a fantasy world. Should be an easy design concept. Now, I could roll for a class, but I prefer to have a little extra chaos in my design process. The chaotic method actually helps me come up with different story reasons and meanings behind them. So I like to roll my stats, but the highest and lowest rolls have to be put in the stat order that their roll corresponds to. So first roll would be strength, second roll would be int, third would be con, fourth would be dex, fifth whiz, and sixth charisma. 11, 13, 9, 14, 16, and 10. With 9 in con and 16 in whiz, I'm thinking we maybe make a druid. A sickly druid, or maybe a rotting one. Could be a little fun opposite of what we normally think of with druids. We could go into the circle of spores or circle of dreams maybe. With a 9 in con, they wouldn't be great at concentrating and kind of have a sickly demeanor. I think with our next lowest stat, 10, we go in the charisma. The Lolita dress, they might be kind of cute and well dressed from afar, making their charisma not total garbage despite their sickly look. 11, I think we'll put into strength. With these medium-high stat rolls, I think they're probably some kind of adventurer or skilled person before they got sick. We'll make up for their low adventuring stats from strength and charisma with a high dex and int, implying they were once a quick thinker and rather smart. Maybe we can do a mushroom curse, with fungus growing out of them. They didn't pick a circle. They received their druid circle by the curse warping them, or maybe a disease. And I think we'll name her Ariet. Let's gather some inspiration up. Mushrooms. I really like the different shapes of mushrooms. I think Dryad Saddle, Baggy Mushroom, really neat looking. Also maybe red cups, as they kind of have a reverse look to what we normally think of mushrooms, having that upward bowl shape. Pretty cute. Lolita dresses have a large variety of styles, but I think just to give the mushroom more emphasis, we might just go with the old plain Lolita look. When I was looking at mushrooms, I had the idea of maybe using the zombie ant fungus from the tropics as inspiration. Like maybe this is a full disease or plague. The disease takes over you but doesn't kill you right away, keeping you alive but hijacking your brain into wanting to spread, leading well into animating spores. Animating spores 3 times a day. Ariet targets one corpse of a humanoid within 5 feet of her and releases spores at the corpse or unconscious humanoid. In 1 minute, the corpse rises as a plagued creature. The corpse stays animated until destroyed, and it can't be animated again in this way. I can imagine coming up with cool descriptions in-game of how the animating spores look, their jaws unhinging as spores float out of it, infecting unconscious bodies around them. The disease could even maybe puppet the body after you wither away and die, giving you Undead Fortitude. Undead Fortitude. If damage reduces Ariette to 0 hit points, she must take a Constitution saving throw with a DC of 5 plus the damage taken. Unless the damage is radiant or from a critical hit, on a success, Ariette drops to 1 hit point instead. The curse rapidly taking control of your motor controls, so you're left watching it fulfill its need to spread as you slowly starve to death under its control. Okay, well, that's a little messed up, but I like it, and you can make it less messed up in your games if you want. But personally, I love horror. I think with this being a mushroom druid, we absolutely have to go Circle of Spores, which would give it a Halo of Spore effect. Spores. Ariette is surrounded by invisible necrotic spores. When a creature moves into a space within 10 feet of her, or starts its turn there, Ariette can use her reaction to deal 2d6 necrotic damage to that creature unless it succeeds a DC 13 con saving throw. Mushrooms also tend to grow in massive hordes, with tons of mushrooms all connected to the same mycelium. Maybe giving these zombies a hive-like mind? Not only do they feel the same connection to needing the spread, but maybe they're alerted when others are harmed around it. Distress Spore. When Ariette takes damage, all other plagued within 240 feet of it can sense its pain. Now, attacks. Although Ariette was once an adventurer, I think she was maybe turned off guard. So she doesn't have her weapons with her, and only has her body and spells to attack. Blam, melee weapon attack, +2 to the hit, 5 feet reach, 1 target, 2d6 bludgeoning damage. And for spells, you get Chill Touch, Blindness/Deafness, and Gentle Repose from Circle Spores. However, I think Gentle Repose is kind of redundant with animating spores, so we'll skip that spell. I think spells she maybe had before she was turned were Druidcraft, Horn Whip, Absorb Elements, Detect Poison and Disease, Earth Tremors, making her some kind of herbalist, healer, definitely utility based. But after she turned, she gained Infestation, Entangle, Gust of Wind to spread the spores, Spike Growth, Withering Bloom. I think the visual of these spells could be really fun to mix in with the mycelium and fungus thematic. Just before we dive into the story about how Ariette becomes infected, Ariette and other characters will be available as stat blocks on my Patreon, as well as some of her battle maps. Link in description. Ariette sat in her small, dimly lit room, surrounded by a symphony of glass clinking and scents of various herbs waft through the air. The room echoed with the sound of mortar and pestle grinding away at concoction of mystical plants. Suddenly, a crash from downstairs jolted her out of her trance. She grabbed the candle from her table. Its flickering flame cast long, eerie shadows on the stone walls. She headed down the narrow, winding staircase. The house was purged into an unnatural silence. As she reached the kitchen, she was met with a sight that sent chills down her spine. Her mother lay sprawling on the floor, her body abnormally still. A large, grotesque man towered over her, his back hunched. There were black spores that seemed to flow from the man's mouth, floating in the air before they found their way into her mother's mouth. Ariette gasped, her heart hammering against her ribcage. She watched in horror as the spores seemed to take over her mother, her skin giving a sickly pallor, and the man turned slightly, as if sensing her presence, his eyes glinting in candlelight. Fear rooted her to the spot, her mind screaming at her to run, but her body refusing to obey. Suddenly, her mother twitched violently, her skin sprouting mycelium at an alarming rate. The sight was enough to shake Ariette out of her stupor. She turned on her heels and ran, her breath coming in ragged gasps. She could hear the heavy footsteps of the creature following her, the sound echoing in the once safe confines of her home. Ariette slid into a closet in the hallway, her heart pounding against her chest like a drum. We could hear the shuffling of the grotesque man as he slowly made his way towards her, the sound echoing in the silence of the house. She covered her mouth, struggling to suppress the sound of her heavy breathing. Time seemed to have stopped. Each second stretched into an eternity. We could hear the man slow down right outside the closet, his hand brushing against the door. She held her breath as she heard him sniff around, his movement causing the closet door to creak ominously. Then, just as quick as he had appeared, he was gone. Arette let out a sigh of relief, her body sagging against the closet wall. But as the immediate danger passed, the image of her father flashed through her mind. She felt a surge of bravery bubble up within her. She needed to find him. Without a second thought, she burst out the closet and ran back upstairs, her fear replaced with determination. She skidded to a halt at the entrance of her parents' room, her heart dropping at the sight before her. Her father lay lifeless on the floor, his body cold and still. Suddenly, she felt a presence behind her. She spun around, coming face to face with her mother, but it was no longer the woman she knew. Her skin was covered in sprouting mushrooms, her eyes vacant and devoid of any recognition. Before Arette could react, her mother swung a pan, hitting her square in the head. Arette collapsed onto the floor, her vision blurring as darkness consumed her. She could feel a strange sensation on her skin, tiny needles prickling her. When she looked down, she saw mushrooms spinning from her skin, their growth rapid and relentless. She could do nothing but watch as her body was taken over. The last thing Arette remembered was standing up, her movements heavy and uncoordinated. She shambled towards the door, her mind clouded with a fog she couldn't shake off. She could feel the weight of her body, the mushrooms growing heavier with each passing second. As she reached the door, only one thought in her head: bread. Bread. And with that, another house claimed by the plague. Hope you enjoyed my first video. It was super fun to make, and if you're interested in seeing more D&D characters be made, consider subscribing. Have a smiley day!